Thank you so much and welcome to our session, Getting on the Same Page, Creating a Collaborative Committee to Improve Transfer Student Onboarding. My name is Jasmine Howard. I am the Senior Academic Advisor in the Office of Academic Advising at New Jersey Institute of Technology. We commonly call it NJIT for short. We use a lot of acronyms there. I've been at NJIT since September 2014. I was a transfer student. I actually started at NJIT way back in September 2001, and then I ultimately transferred to Montclair State University.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shannon Nammour. I am also a senior academic advisor at NJIT, specifically within the Ying College of Computing. That means that I mostly advise students who are pursuing computing majors, so mostly computer science, information technology, things like that. I have been at NJIT since April of 2020, and so I onboarded remotely during the height of the pandemic, which I would not recommend to anyone. I am also a transfer student, and so I came from Rider University, a small private school in New Jersey, and transferred, ironically, to Montclair State as well.
NJIT is a mid-sized public polytechnic research university. We are located in Newark, New Jersey, which is an urban city. It's the largest city in New Jersey. And for our recent May 2022 graduating class, 1 out of 3 undergraduate degree earners identified as a transfer student. So what we placed at everyone's seat, hopefully, and if you need a packet, just let us know, is a packet of some of the handouts that we're going to reference. The cover page is a snapshot of our transfer student profile. So this was created by members of the Education and Data Collection Subcommittee, who are part of our National Transfer Student Week Planning Committee. So this was created for our fall 2022 National Transfer Student Week celebration, and we thought it might be a helpful snapshot for all of you today to see some more details about our transfer population.
Thank you. All right, and so what do we hope that you all will leave this session with today? 3 things. So really throughout this session, we invite you to reflect on your own home campus and think about your incoming transfer student onboarding process. Now, I know that that's a mouthful, but how we define that is really through the admission process all the way through to the incoming transfer students' end of their first semester at NJIT. So thinking about what are all of the processes that you have at your home institution and what is one area that you can identify for improvement. That's number 1. Number 2 is thinking about a key stakeholder that can help you make change in that process. So whether that is maybe someone in admissions or the registrar's office or another department that you may have on your campus. And then lastly, we hope that you will leave here being able to recognize the multi-step process to actually develop a collaborative incoming transfer student onboarding committee at your home institution. So if you feel so inclined and you are motivated to create something like this at your home institution, we hope to provide you with the tools to do so.
Thank you, Shannon. We both are here in addition to being senior academic advisors in our respective departments. We're also members of NJIT's Incoming Transfer Student Onboarding Administrative Committee. I serve as a co-chair for that committee, along with the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies. But before we get into details about our current committee, I just wanted to start with giving a little bit of context to a group that met before this. We would meet under what we titled monthly transfer meetings. So there were representatives from admissions, registrar, and one of our advising offices. NJIT, just a little additional context, we pretty much operate under decentralized advising. So depending upon if you're a first-year student or a transfer student, or if you're an engineering major or a liberal arts major, that determines who advises you when, for how long. Is it a semester? Is it through graduation? So there's a lot of variety there. But with those meetings, we met from 2016 to 2019. I'm saying we. I was also part of that group as well. We were doing some good work in terms of collaborating with our different areas to learn what are we each doing for transfer students, why we're doing it, We were able to have some outcomes that came out of that committee. There were some changes in staffing. There were some changes in focus and priorities, where those meetings became, we'll say, less productive. So the consensus at that time was to put a pause on those meetings because, again, when we meet, we want it to be where we're moving forward and taking action steps, and we want it to be collaborative, not where at any point it's becoming, I'd say, less collaborative. So there was a pause on those meetings. And then, and at that time, there were about 7 members of that committee. And then we have the current iteration. So you'll notice that there was about a 2-year break between those committees meeting. We had an increase in the number of transfer students enrolling at NJIT. So when I started, it was closer to about half the amount that it grew to. So again, it came to the forefront again, like we really need to talk to each other because we have a lot of students that are coming into the university, and we need to be able to make sure that we have open lines of communication so that that way we can best meet those students' needs. So there was a time for 2021 when we had over 1,000 new transfer students coming to the school annually. And then we also had a new strategic plan that was being implemented. And finally, we had transfer students by name. Yay! So I'm going to read this verbatim. It said, in our Building on a Strong Foundation, NJIT 2025 strategic plan, support transfer students as they integrate into the NJIT community and adjust to the rigorous academic environment. Transfer students face many challenges that can be eased through targeted services, resulting in a smooth transition to NJIT. So that helped the stage for being able to say, we should meet again. Let's do this. We can get on the same page, as it is in our title, to really work together, to be intentional about meeting the students' needs. And when you get it in your strategic plan, you're able to get more people on board because it's like, we said we're going to do this. This is a public document, so we have to do something in order to make sure that we're meeting this goal. And so this is just a quick overview chart of the former version of the committee. We had about representation from about 4 areas, and then this current committee, we have representation from about 11 areas. So, and actually the previous one wasn't we didn't call it a committee. We just said we were having monthly transfer meetings, whereas this current iteration is our incoming transfer student onboarding administrative committee. Myself, along with the vice provost for undergraduate studies, we co-chair that committee, and then we have representation from multiple areas and growing.
So, as Jasmine so nicely explained, she is one of the co-chairs for the committee. So it was her and the vice provost who essentially co-chair the committee. So I'll go through a little bit of the step-by-step process as to how that was created, but really the focus and what happened was that Jasmine and her supervisor at the time, along with the vice provost, really outlined the shared goals and the vision for the committee. And so the vision is to streamline the transitional process for incoming transfer students. Again, we define that as from admission through the end of their first semester. And then determining the 3 goals of what would this committee focus on. I will be very honest in sharing that the committee really has stuck to the first goal, which is effective and consistent communication. So this is effective communication to those incoming transfer students, as well as effective communication across departments and across divisions and anyone who works with those incoming transfer students. The other 2 goals that we are in the process of more defining and working on are the campus community engagement and also creating more academic support for our incoming transfer students. So in terms of the step-by-step process, the 3 of them got together, outlined the vision and goals, and then they were really intentional with identifying potential members for the committee. And so in that process, they really thought about who has institutional or organizational power and influence to make change in this process. And thinking about, additionally, who is committed to providing support and services to incoming transfer students. And let's get everyone in the room together, invite them to this committee, and make it happen. So they had emailed the invitation to those potential committee members, which Jasmine will go over with you in just a minute. And in that email, identified the time commitment, because how many of you have ever been asked to serve on a committee where you're not really given the time commitment of how long it would take, or how much of your time are you saying yes to if you're saying yes? So organizing for our committee, it's every other week meetings, and every semester getting together to determine what are some dates to avoid. So as an example, something like the last day to add or drop classes, where advisors are very busy, that's a date where they're not having any meetings, because that means the advisors aren't going to be present. So being strategic with the dates that are picked. You all have the handout packet that Jasmine was referring to you previously, and inside of this, there is the first meeting agenda. So we, again, want to provide as many tools for you all if this is something that you're interested in doing at your home campus. And then lastly, for our purposes of the committee, at NJIT, Google Drive works best for us. I know that many other institutions have things like Microsoft Teams or other versions of shared spaces, but we keep all of our meeting agendas, our minutes, and our committee documents all accessible to all of the committee members through the Google Drive.
Thank you, Shannon. So in your packet on the second page, you have the accessible version of the committee invitation email. That's a snapshot up here. With the handouts, we tried to really just give you actually what we sent out. And then we just put little notes like, okay, that's what we put for ours in terms of a strategic plan. If it's not in your strategic plan, or if there's a policy or something else you want to highlight, then that might be an area to do it. But we crafted the email together, myself and my former supervisor, who's now the executive director of the Office of Student Transition, with the blessing of the vice provost, to send out. And we really were trying to be very intentional, like Shannon said, about who we were inviting to the committee, because we wanted it to be people who were willing to definitely, if they did not have the organizational influence yet, because that could change, that they're committed to working with transfer students. And then others, it's, you have the power to make this change. So if you're on this committee, then we can just get this done like a lot faster than trying to go through loopholes or sending emails, etc. So that was very important. And I would say with Shannon, she was a newer advisor at the time, because she started in April 2020. And this committee was being started in the spring of 2021. But in my interactions with her, just in that time, they were very positive in terms of working with transfer students. I loved her energy. I already saw that she was advocating for students. I think sometimes we think like, oh, we need someone who's been here a decade to be on the committee. But I was like, well, she might bring like a fresh perspective. She might be more objective, because she won't have all the insider knowledge, which can go either way, depending on what it is. So, and I was right. She's amazing. So, even just thinking about who you want to invite on the committee, maybe even think outside the box of who is traditionally selected to be a committee member. But it really is key. Like, do they enjoy working with students? And then do they enjoy working with transfer students? Like, really making sure that the committee that you put together, or the committee that you already have, or group that's already meeting, like, how can you make sure that this group of people is really committed to doing the work? So yeah, that's our committee invitation email if you want to review it in detail, and if it's something that might be helpful for you all to use as well.
Thank you, Jasmine. And so that's the committee email. And then, yes, I briefly touched on the agenda. And I just want to note one more thing is on the agenda. And during that first meeting, we again highlighted our strategic plan. Why are we doing this? So if this is something that you wish to do on your campus, but you go to your strategic plan and transfer students are not there, maybe that's an area for you to start and an area for you to identify as area of improvement. All right, so what has our committee done to date? Well, at NJIT, One of the things that was brought to the committee are how incoming transfer students really struggled with having international transfer credits as well as expired transfer credits. So at NJIT, undergraduate credits expire within 10 years. And what the committee was able to do was to provide transparency. And so we created web pages to outline those different processes of how to go about getting those credits evaluated. And so that allows for those incoming transfer students to have a place to go where all the information is consistent. Something else that we did was work closely with admissions to create a text message series. So these are text messages that are going out to incoming transfer students to remind them about important deadlines. At NJIT, an incoming transfer student can be admitted without an official transcript. And so some of the text message series are reminders of, hey, get your official transcript in because that's going to allow you to register for classes. That's going to allow you to get your transfer equivalencies in, along with important deadlines about the last day to add or drop or when registration is happening. Additionally, we have a presentation that is done twice a year from the vice provost. And so the vice provost gets all advisors on NJIT's campus. All advisors are welcome. And this meeting is really to provide updates for anything that has changed from the last meeting. And so what our committee does is we work closely to update all of the information that is presented at that meeting. Advocacy. So our committee has, up until this past year, incoming transfer students were not allowed to waitlist for classes, which was a huge problem because I'm sure many of you deal with this of how many closed classes there are, and our incoming transfer students can't register for classes. And so as of this year, they are now able to waitlist, which allows them the opportunity to get into those classes that are needed. And then lastly, the building of relationships between departments. And so how often do we hear that higher ed is a silo, right? And you can be working in your own department, but not really know what's happening in another department, in another division, et cetera. And so our committee allows for the breaking down of some of those silos. So to give an example, I was recently working with a readmitted student. And this student had a unique situation come up, which was a very gray area. And I worked with some people on campus to kind of get an answer, but I was like, I don't know. So I actually emailed the vice provost, and I will be very honest in sharing that if I didn't have access to the vice provost through this committee, I probably would have never reached out and emailed him. And then he called me right away, and we were able to spend 5 minutes on the phone finding a solution for this student. But that really allowed the committee, and the access allowed for that relationship building and that quick solution to happen, which was really great.
Now we wanted to move into some of the highlights in terms of what we're focusing on now in the committee. So in one of our recent meetings, under each area that's represented, I had as a bullet point on the agenda, what are the challenges, pain points, et cetera, to be addressed for our incoming fall 2023 transfer student class. So what are the things we noticed for the spring class that came in that weren't working well? Are any of those things we can rectify, change, improve, enhance for this class that's coming in now? They're already being admitted to the university. Registration for us is going to start in mid-April. Those registration priority dates are up. So if there are any things that we feel we can change right now, let's do those. And then also if there are things that they might need to take a little longer, let's also identify those and who's going to work on them. So that's what we're focusing on now. Also, in terms of universal transfer credits, so for some of the classes, we've noticed, like, wait a minute, this class has come in and has been evaluated by the academic department 5, 10, 15 times. Can we get to a point where it's like a universal credit once all? We have a lot of credits that are universal. but that tends to be from like our community college system where we use something called NJ Transfer. But we do have more students who are coming from four-year universities, or maybe they're coming from community colleges outside of New Jersey. So how do we also get to the point where once that credit is evaluated, we're not saying it just counts for Jasmine, but it counts for Jasmine, it counts for Shannon, it counts for Emily, anyone else who's coming in. So working on getting that process updated, and that would be through also our registrar's office. Some of the future considerations we have, we're trying to be more intentional about who we're inviting to come to the committee meetings. So that way it's not remaining with just the committee members, but we've talked about like, how do we get transfer students involved in the meetings? There was a discussion about having a transfer student represented as a committee. We also talked about the fact there are some things that come up in the committee meetings that are like in progress, or we don't know if we're actually going to take it past this meeting. So to balance that out, and we decided, okay, maybe to start though, we can start inviting transfer students to come in and share their experiences. The good, the not so good, and the in-between. Sometimes it's very different for administrators to hear directly from a student versus maybe Shannon, myself, and other advisors saying, well, when I met with this student, this happened, versus the student themselves sharing what happened. Again, it could be a positive happening, and if so, maybe that's something we need to replicate. Or if it's not so positive, how do we address this? How do we ensure that we don't have another student who's feeling this way if it wasn't so positive? Also, other staff members who may present from other offices, like our Office of Persistence and Re-enrollment. One of the colleagues in that office is going to be joining us for our March meeting. And then also academic evaluators. We talk a lot about that evaluation process, but we don't really hear that much from the evaluators themselves. To invite them to the meetings. What is your experience? Is there something else we should be doing in terms of verbiage or how we're communicating to students what is needed, so that way you can do your job more efficiently? So those are some of the things we're looking at, just various ways to how to continue improving the onboarding experience of our NJIT transfer students. And then, as Shannon had mentioned earlier, yes, we've been working on effective and consistent communication, making positive strides there. And also, we want our transfer students engaged with the campus community. We want them to be Highlanders. That's our mascot at NJIT. We want them to feel that they're academically supported. It is a rigorous school. It is no secret at NJIT that Calculus 2 is, ooh. So how do we go from it just being like a rough time to them actually being supported? Or is it that if you're starting Calculus 1 at your previous college, when I'm meeting with students now, is there a way for you to just finish out Calc 2 there? So that way you're not ending Calculus 1 with a different professor, a different textbook, a different train of thought, and then coming in, jumping into a part 2 that is completely different than what you had. Like, how can we work on those things? So those are some of the future considerations that we have right now.
And as with anything that we create in higher education, of course, there are growing pains along the way. And so it is sometimes not easy to get everyone on the same page, right? And so for us, we have found that keeping transfer students and keeping that goal of streamlining the process at the forefront of our committee has been very helpful. Also, focusing on the specific issue or concern and not finger pointing at specific departments on campus has been very helpful. I can share that I had asked a question in one of the meetings about, well, why is this done? Because understanding the why can be really helpful. So to share, I mentioned earlier that at NJIT, incoming transfer students can be admitted without having an official transcript. And so we talked about, well, why is that? And for the different areas to share, okay, well, what is the impact? And I think understanding the why allows us to first get on the same page and then understand what are the ramifications or what are the perimeters for how we can make change while doing this. Sometimes it is helpful to, I think I'm someone who is constantly asking well, I had an interaction with this transfer student and here's what happened, so how can we make it better? And there's been times where let's say the director of admissions says, well, that's not really my area, but so-and-so, can you speak to that a little bit? And because the decision makers are on the committee, it's really helpful to be able to hash out, okay, it's not necessarily your area, but it's not your area either, but how can we come to some resolution in the committee so that we alleviate another email or alleviate the, I have to go talk to my supervisor and I'll get back to you kind of thing. So problem solving is definitely encouraged within the committee, and I attribute that to the environment that has been set up as part of the committee.
Thank you. We've been sharing a lot, so we want to give you all an opportunity to reflect on the transfer student onboarding experiences at your own school. And then we're going to ask you all to pair up to discuss these questions. Are transfer students included in your school's strategic plan? What is one aspect of your school's transfer student onboarding process that can be improved? And who are the key stakeholders that can help you advocate for change in that specific area? So we'll give you all a minute to think about it, and then we'll ask you to pair up in groups of no more than 2 or 3 to discuss these questions. We'll give you about 5 minutes to do that, and then I'll ask for a volunteer to share. All right, we're looking for one volunteer to share. Since it's a think, pair, share, we want to make sure we don't forget the. Do we have a brave volunteer? Anyone to share? I see. Oh, are you being voluntold? Are you okay with sharing? I want to make sure. All right, if you want to share your name, the school you're at, and thank you for volunteering. Thank you for volunteering. You don't have to stand
cool.
up, whatever's comfortable.
All right, awesome. So we just jotted down really quickly. We have, is it Cleveland State? And she is the assistant director of transfer and recruitment. And then we also have New York Institute of Technology. Yeah. So we have Cheryl, the assistant director of transfer and admissions. My name is Nicolette Weston. I am actually with a nonprofit organization, the American Indian College Funds, and we basically support 35 tribal colleges. And I am the transfer and admissions program administrator. So I'm currently working with tribal colleges to help create this transfer support system. Because right now, currently, tribal colleges are not up to what the rest of the country is doing right now in terms of, the credit transfers and all of the technology pieces that are included into that as well. So our students included in our school's strategic plan for the college fund, yes, that it's been written in there. That is why I am here. For what was your name? Amanda. I didn't even get your name. For Amanda and for Cheryl, it has raised a question. So that has planted a seed there for them. One aspect of school's transfer student onboarding process, Cheryl shared that the transition from admissions to registration can be improved. And then for Amanda, it was the orientation process. And then for ours, it's everything. It needs to be built up. And then the stakeholders that can advocate would be, of course, all of us sitting here. And then along with, for ours would be like the college fund and the tribal colleges and admissions, advising faculty departments for what they shared.
We'll give a round of applause. Thank you so much. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And so what we will invite you to do now is to take out whatever it is that you started to take notes on during Dr. Liza's session earlier today. So maybe that is the notepad on your phone, maybe you're old school like me and prefer pen and paper, whatever it is that you use to take notes. And so I'm going to give you just a brief amount of time here. And so I ask that you write down that one area for improvement, right? And so maybe it is the question of, at your home institution, are transfer students even in your strategic plan? And if not, maybe that's your one area for improvement. So take a minute, not a full minute, but some time, and write down that area for improvement. All right, and so now that you have that area for improvement, I want you to think about and write down the name of at least one key stakeholder that has influence or maybe power in that area for improvement. And what we encourage you to do before you leave Portland and before this conference ends, we invite you to think about sending an email and to actually do that action step of sending the email to that aforementioned key stakeholder and invite them to talk about that area for improvement. And so it doesn't have to be anything fancy, right? You can say, hey, I'm at this really great conference and I've identified that there's some room for improvement in our incoming transfer student onboarding process. Do you have a few minutes next week or 2 weeks from now to talk about what that might look like in terms of change? And again, each of you is going to navigate that a little bit differently based on who your key stakeholder is and based on what your area for improvement is.
All right. Thank you, Shannon. So as we're getting to the latter part of the session, we just wanted to go over some of the strategies that have come out of our current incoming transfer student onboarding administrative committee. That's the last page of the handout, so you could see that in much larger legible font in the handout. The first being commit to shared vision and goals. So it's really important to have a focus for the committee, an overarching vision, specific goals. Again, to Shannon's point, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be very direct. We encourage you to have it direct, concise, clear, so that way everyone understands why you all are meeting. We recommend that when this happens, you collaborate with at least one other stakeholder, because this is, again, about collaborating, not just trying to take it all on your own. And then we also encourage you to be open to adjusting these as the needs of transfer students change, perhaps as the needs of your institution or focus of your institution changes. So you could definitely be flexible with those. And then we also, with that, encourage you to openly discuss enrollment goals and numbers. It helps to give a context to all of the committee members. We talked about the why, like that is very important. Like why is this the enrollment goal for our university, and how do we all work together to meet that? Because whether you're in admissions or not, if you work at that university, then you're tied to that in some way. So it's helpful sometimes to just know why this number is set and how is it set. And then that way you all can move forward. Transparency, that's really helpful, we found. And then also to collect that qualitative data, the numbers. So you can show charts and all of that data that senior administrators appreciate, and that is helpful for our day-to-day work as well. We're all in various roles. That's very important in terms of making decisions or asking maybe perhaps for changes to be made. We also find it helpful to create the space. So in that, we mean be intentional about who you invite to join the committee. We put think impact. So again, for us, it's meant to be an action-based committee, not just like taking in information, but every committee member is then willing to take some sort of action step to move forward towards the different areas we identify for improvement. To capitalize on relationships across campus. We've talked a lot about how relationship building is so important. And then also to set expectations for the time commitment. So initially with our committee, it was meeting monthly, and then we found a benefit to be meeting bi-weekly, which is more in line with what we were doing for our first year students. So a lot has been done for first year students at our university over the years, and we were like, okay, we need to also allocate this time to our transfer students, which is another large number of new students who are coming into our institution.
Yes, and so once you have the space created, we encourage you to utilize that space to make change. And so something that we found that has been helpful is highlighting those case studies for those incoming transfer students and their specific experiences, to bring that to the committee to share, I met with a student this past week and here's what happened. So how can we make this better? How can this be changed? If any of you are sitting on other committees across campus, The what about transfer students question is always a really great one as well. But you want to ensure consistent and accessible information. So that's where the Google Drive or equivalency comes into play, where you have those meeting agendas that are sent out ahead of time. Each department representative knows what's going to be asked of them and knows what to report on during the committee. We actually do a screen share and we take minutes during the committee because we meet virtually. And that way everybody is on the same page about what information is being documented and being shared. And then lastly, you want to measure effectiveness. So record those outcomes. And so that way you can utilize it to advocate for additional incoming transfer student onboarding supports and services. Some important reminders: you're not always going to agree on everything. So agree to disagree, and that's okay. Sometimes compromise is still a step in the right direction. And so don't be discouraged if you have this large goal that you're trying to meet and you're only getting, like a little baby step. Building collaborations across departments may be progress in itself. Maybe you have some contention relationships across campus. And so breaking down those silos is still helpful and still progress. Remember that Rome wasn't built in a day, and some things take time. For us, it was stopping that initial version of the committee and then restarting it. Remember that we're all on the same team, and we all want a smooth transition for those incoming transfer students. And then remember that you are a connector for transfer student success, and that you all have typically some level of power over how you impact and influence transfer students. So we appreciate you all being here. So thank you for coming. And at this time, I'll hand it over to Jasmine for some questions.
Have you gotten any pushback from not having any faculty representation on the committee, or have you thought about having any?
As an academic department representative, I'm not in an academic department, so.
So that's a great question. And so far, we have not gotten pushback. And I think that is something that we've been intentional about trying to see if we can invite faculty evaluators, because typically the faculty members are the ones doing the equivalencies for classes that don't have those universal equivalencies across the board. So I will be very honest in saying that faculty are very busy, and the ask would be important. Would they be able to come? I think it depends per department, because I know the departments that I work with, even asking them to attend, a team meeting sometimes it can be a little bit challenging, but definitely something that is on our list for future considerations. But so far, no strong pushback about not having a faculty member.
We have something similar already at our institution. It's called Team Transfer, if anyone wants a snappy name for theirs. But one of the issues that I think that we're running into is that some of the largest impacts, some of the ones that we can all come together and agree on, are outside of our control. It's very much the middle management that are working on these things. So do you have any advice for managing up? In particular, the example that's coming up for me is that there just aren't enough sections of the classes that transfer students need. And adding seats is not possible, and creating them is not okay because that could ruin the budget if the class gets canceled. And so there's all those things that are outside of our control. So how do we manage up and get those folks that aren't a part of the initial committee on board for those?
Very good question. I guess we benefit from the fact that the registrar and then associate registrar and the transfer credit evaluator from our registrar's office are on the committee. But even with that, the academic departments still rule in a lot of areas in terms of with the budgets and the closed courses. To be honest, we've just kept making the ask over the years. And we got into a situation most recently in the spirit of transparency where it kind of like imploded. It became a huge issue that we're admitting all of these students and the classes are closed. And now you have students that are supposed to be welcoming, and now they're feeling disgruntled because we said, register, register, register. Oh, wait, there's nothing for you to register for. And of course, you don't want it to be where it implodes, but in some ways, we'll try to turn it as a positive that when it's gotten to that point where now we're like, okay, wait, like we really do have to do something about this now. It's not okay that things are closed, or are we still going to keep the same enrollment number, or does that need to change? So I don't have a direct answer for how you manage up per se, but we have been continuing to make the ask when things do. And then sometimes when things go awry, then we are more all like on a level playing field versus you're here, you're there, you're in this title, I'm in that title. It's like we're all on the same team and we want students to be able to come. And this is not the situation that we will want them to come into. I don't know if you want to add.
So I appreciate the question, and I work in a college where that is often happening, where we have a class that our incoming transfer students need to take because it is not transferable from any other campus. And so that is a class that is always filling up. And what I have found to be helpful is we have an academic coordinator who is the person who is responsible for going to the department to say, hey, we need more classes. And they coordinate permits for classes and things like that. But letting them know ahead of time, hey, we're having a transfer orientation where we are expecting 35 students and I need 35 seats in this class. What can you do for me? And sometimes they will say, okay, I can spare 2 seats in this section, 3 seats in this section, and then we're playing like permit tag. Or sometimes they will say, all right, I'll ask the department, I'll go to the chair. So building a really positive relationship there, and one that I can just pick up the phone and say, next week, transfer orientation, this many students, this many seats are needed, like what can you do for me, has been helpful. But I know that that's not the case for every other institution. So continue to do the best that you can. And I know that that's not a great answer, so sorry.
Also should say that in terms of closed courses, the executive director for the Office of Student Transition each week shares with the vice provost the list of courses that are closed that academic advisors have identified as needs for incoming transfer students. So while sometimes it does get down to the wire, there are some sections that do become open because each week she's reaching out to all the advisors saying if there are any courses that you've identified that they're already closed, whether we're 2 months out from the start of the semester, 1 week out from the start of the semester, that's shared weekly. So they are trying to work on things where possible. So just wanted to make sure I shared that as well.
Thank you. I'm really appreciative of all these resources. My question is about the committee. So you said it was like a working committee. Do you want the committee to then have different leaders that will cycle through, or is this your baby and you have control over it and you will manage the management of the committee?
Great question, and I will turn this over to Jasmine because I think it is Jasmine's baby.
It's so funny on campus when everyone says that. I'm like, I don't view it as my baby, but I guess I've been hanging around trying to say, what about transfer students? I'm definitely open to others taking the reins. No, in all seriousness. I mean, I love doing the work, but I think that there is, I more help to facilitate. So I don't view it as like, yes, I'm the co-chair, but I don't view it as like, okay, it's my committee meeting. Like I literally am like going over the different agenda items and saying, okay, admissions, okay, global initiatives. It's not really like my meeting. I just happen to be the one who's facilitating it or writing the agenda and needs to send the meeting minutes like a lot sooner than I do send them currently. If anyone else wants to take notes, but no, but in all seriousness, it's because the way it's currently set up, it's like, it really is shared ownership of the committee. I just happen to be the one setting up the actual like Zoom meetings or like the agenda. And I might ask probing questions or throw things out there. I think Shannon and I like to be a little bit of rebel rousers, like, well, what about this? But in the way we currently have it, it's not really where it's like a top-down sort of thing. We're all just like sharing, talking, trying to move forward together, if that answers your question.
Did you then build that into your job description? Because that takes time, you know?
I would love to take a few of you back with me. So yes, so it does take time. I actually had a conversation in my last supervision meeting because it also in my role, or my main role, is like a first year advisor and a transitional advisor. And then I also do transfer as like my program area. So it has required some shifting. There are some responsibilities that will need to be removed from my plate because it does take time. And that's to our point of, we need transfer people, not a person. We need a transfer center, because since I've started, it's been like, okay, you do a little of this, you do a little of that, but there's thousands of students, so no one should be doing a little of anything. Like, they matter, so we need to put the people and other resources to it. But if you want to come with me, and I would love for this to be like my whole job and not like a part of it. But yeah, that's how it's set up currently.
All right. And with that said, we are out of time for questions. Sorry, we went a little bit over, but thank you so much for your time. And if you all could fill out the session evaluation, that would be really great. So thanks again, and we'll stick around in case anybody has questions.